Yep, sure.
Ai, e mihi anō I tai mai whakarongo ngā kōrero I te tari Kaeo Office. Nō reira, ka nui te mihi e mihi mahana ki a koe anō Murray. Welcome back again to our kōrero here regarding some of the concepts around our cultures and the in particular our Māori culture and our Pakeha culture and how unique they are, and some of the concepts around how they gel together and work together, and the evolutionary processes or creative processes that are used for that particular purpose. So in saying that, a warm welcome to you again. I'm going to call this, Murray, if I can, part 2 or a follow on from our last conversation, if that's okay. But in saying that, tēnā koe, Murray. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Bryce. Good to see you again. So just from following on from where we were at the end of the last discussion, you talked about Tangata Whenua Pakeha, and Tangata Whenua Māori having responsibilities around the care of or the management of land and water and seawater resources, and it'd be good if we could develop that subject some more today, Bryce.
Tēnā koe, Murray. So in some thoughts about the coming from a tangata whenua perspective, what that relationship looked like, all those responsibilities, how I'd like to begin this part of the discussion, Murray, is give some initial perspective as to where these responsibilities derive from and possibly some of the reasoning around. So I've decided at this particular point to begin with our stories about our environment and some of the names of our environmental attributes. This particular event involves a person called Tāne Nui Ārangi. Now, Tāne Nui Ārangi had many names. Initially Tāne, the one that separated mother and father, Rangi Nui and Papatuanuku, and then Tāne Nui Ārangi. In particular, there was also another name, Tāne Mahuta, where Tāne was a procreated and begat the forest and the different types of trees that exist in our ngahere or our forest area. But in this particular explanation, I'd like to expose the Tāne Nui Ārangi event, Murray, for the purpose of our discussion. So at a particular point in time, Tāne Nui Ārangi was sent on a journey, and that journey was to go through significant spiritual levels to gain what's known here as ngā kite mātauranga, or the baskets of knowledge. The 3 baskets. Now, it is said there were in fact 4 baskets, but I'm just going to talk about the 3 baskets in ngā kite mātauranga. It is also been identified, Murray, that Tāne Nui Ārangi had an accompany, and that person's name was Whero, that accompanied him through the journey of those 9. Those 9 areas that I'll say that Tāne Nui Ārangi travelled through to get those ngā kite mātauranga, he also had to return back home to come through them. And it wasn't an easy journey that was. And apparently the journey coming home was worse than the journey getting there. They didn't get handed to him on a plate, I'll say it like that, or her. So the 3 baskets, usually using explanation words, there was a physical basket, there was a mental basket, and there was a spiritual basket concluded in the Ngā Kite Mātauranga collective. When he returned home, Murray, Tāne Nui Ārangi buried the baskets of knowledge into Papatuanuku, buried them. And then the next sequence that Tāne did was he began the process of creating the first human. And I'll just say it like that for explanation. So he gathered certain ingredients, and these ingredients are another discussion. And one of those ingredients was part of ngā kite mātauranga, or the 3 baskets of knowledge. And these are those tools that we're going to try to expose as the responsibilities of tangata whenua, including Tangata Whenua Pakeha, including Tangata Whenua Māori. They're in those initially 3 baskets of knowledge. Now, when he was creating the first maternal, I'll say it like that, the last thing that he did, and being a forest person, he breathed, he gave breath to this form, and that breath, his breath gave life. And as we know from the Tāne Mahuta situation, that breath of life is a transfer of carbon into oxygen that the trees do to allow us to exist here on Earth by providing oxygen for us to breathe. So the first point I would like to make in regards to discovering or rediscovering those responsibilities, Murray, would be to get to know the children of Ranginui and Papatuanuku, or the children of Sky Father and Mother Earth. I'll say it like that because in those events that took place with those children right from the separation, you'll start to see some of the tools that have been translated for today's problems that we have. They get them from a certain place, they bring them to a dissemination line, and then translate them or make them easy to understand in today's language. So Tāne created an individual called Hiniahone. That was the first maternal, and Hiniahone was made out of the earth. A question I will ask, but doesn't require an answer, just a consideration as an attempt to understand the behavior of our culture in the tangata whenua perspective. Murray, may sound untoward, but once we diagnose it or research it, we'll get to some understanding as to why some of the standards that we set today and where they come from. Where does that source of that standard come from, which is actually what we're trying to disclose here. So the name of that first creation from Tāne was the maternal Hiniahone. Now, Tāne and Hiniahone, this is the question. Did Tāne create his wife because he made Hiniahone out of ingredients of his mother from the earth, and the earth is his mother, Papatuanuku? That's the question. It's a type of antithesis exercise, Murray, because of the mindset saying that Hiniahone was created by Tāne to be his wife. In my thinking, Tāne Nuiarangi made Hiniahone out of ingredients of his mother from the earth. And the only foreign ingredient was ngā kite mātauranga, or the baskets of knowledge. So in my understanding, if we look at that, Tāne as a metaphor, Murray, actually made Hiniahone is his sister, because Tāne was made from his mother too. And so was Hiniahone. So there was that kind of concept. Then they beget a person or another maternal Hinetitama. And at a point in time, these are some of the tools, Murray. At a point in time, Hinetitama asked, who then was her husband, Tāne, who is my father? And Tāne responded, go and have a look in the whare and look at the carvings, because that's where the story is told of your whakapapa. And she went into the whare and she saw that her husband, Tāne, was in fact her father. And Hiniahone was the mother. And so these are the kinds of things that need unpacking Murray, like the story of Pakeha, where did that come from? They need unpacking to understand the philosophies of the standards that are had. You know, these are some of the standards that are had. And then, as we know, Hine Titama, as finding that out in a contemporary judiciary world, it could be called all sorts of bad things. But then Hine Titama became Hine Nui Te Pō, who is the carer of our spirits when we pass on earth. And so what a beautiful thing that is, what she did with her grief, or what she did with her happiness. You can look at that two ways. I will go and wait for my descendants and care for them when they pass. So it's said that when we pass, we end up in a place called the Whare Hine Nui Te Pō. These are all parts of those concepts. And then concluding, Murray, with the discussion around the reading of the 1835 document and the 1840 document, reading those documents with those kinds of stories in mind, because again, as I try to consistently say, that what we've just talked about or touched on just now is the mindset of the authors that wrote those documents of 1835 and 1840. So in saying that, that is, I'm possibly being a little bit unfair, Murray, by just laying that out, because each one of those, the Ngā Kite Mātauranga is a huge story that we should continue to talk about. The Tāne Nui Arangi is a huge story, getting to know the siblings, the 70 siblings of Tāne Nui Arangi, getting to know the separation event. There are a huge amount of tools in that separation event and those sequences that happened. But in saying that, Murray, there I would like to suggest is a glimmer, right, at the tools and more to the point, the responsibilities as we make our way to become tangata whenua.
Okay. Cool.
So what I'd like to do, what I'd like to ask, Murray, if we can just more so for our listeners more than anything, if we could have a look at an event today and see if we can unpack it and try to move some of these tools over into our everyday life.
Yeah, for sure.
Kia ora.
That'd help my sort of way of learning if we could sort of see some events or some practical things that I could relate these back to Tāne Nui Arangi.
Kia ora.
Vero. In the district that I live in, near Cambridge, there's a group of landowners and who have decided they want to have a look at doing something about improving the water quality of the Karapiro stream. And it's early days, and we've just had one sort of we've just had one formal meeting, shall we say, of a group of people who will try and forward. This sort of various people, but in terms of the regional council in the early part of the discussion, they had a number of, or they have a number of criteria or aspects of the environment that they monitor to monitor water qualities, and these include things like sedimentation levels, phosphates and nitrates, and E. coli. So those are four things that you can measure in stream water and determine whether they're at an acceptable level according to guides they use, and whether they're improving or deteriorating. And as a result, I will say, to give full credit to you, Bryce, from the things that you've been teaching myself and others these past months, I would be most interested, and the group has undertaken to involve the local iwi when we sort of shall we say get our sort of act together or have some form of around the project, Ngāti Hoia. And I would be most interested in the tools that you described, whereby Tangata Whenua responsibilities can towards the land, and in this case towards streamwater, the tools that could be engaged that we can use to sort of maybe measure our progress, or show that we are trying to proceed in a way that honours our responsibilities as Tangata Whenua. And in this case, it's mostly probably all Tangata Whenua Pakeha. There may be a few Tangata Whenua Māori who actually live on the land in the Karapiro catchment. I'd appreciate you bringing it sort of down a level and talking about some tools that we could use to further this project.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you for that, Murray. That's pleasing to hear. One of the main tools for success, and I'll say it like that, in my experience, is the coming together of Pākehā and Māori on the same subject. Now, in this little village here called Kaeo up in Whangaroa, there have been some in the last 22 decades, 2.5 decades, Murray, the main attribute that our elders encouraged was, let's not have a separate Māori hui and a separate Pākehā hui when it comes to local government on the one stream. Okay, so they encouraged meetings and hui of Māori and Pākehā because we were actually talking the same language. What it disclosed, Murray, it disclosed two separate kits of tools. Pākehā brought their set of tools, Māori brought their set of tools. And when those two baskets of tools came together, some amazing things started to happen. Some very, very amazing things started to happen, where those two kits actually became one kit. And I'm proud of the fact of that initiative from our elders, and it should spread right throughout the country. So I'm excited to hear that Tangata Whenua are participating in that event there. So just to breeze over some of the successful events that happened here under that concept, first and foremost, Māori and Pākehā working together, and those Māori tools and specifically those Pākehā tools working together. There was a log barging event up here in the north, and that was one on a water quality matter and the unity of Māori and Pākehā. There were several developments. There was the one event I would like to, regarding specifically water quality, Murray, was a mining application. It was Aurora Mining, and his name was Rob, very nice man. He was part of the conglomerate Rio Tinto, and he came into Whangaroa and they wanted to do mining, huge mining operation, typically with the promise of employment for the community. That's always been the consistent pitch. Now, if we look at water from this perspective, and there's evidence being delivered in the water claims on this, and I'll try again to give a source. When the separation of Ranginui and Papatuanuku was separated by Tāne, Ranginui's Sky Father began missing his wife Papatuanuku, and tears were shed. So, a long story short, the rain we see are tears of Sky Father, right, out of missing his wife. Now, look at that raindrop, and we mitigated a wastewater treatment plant in Kaeo here using this process. A raindrop drops from the sky, it hits the earth, right, and then it goes into Papatuanuku. And as it's filtering through the different soils and the different rock formations, it finds a natural ability to not only filter. In our culture, Murray, a raindrop that hits a roof and goes into a water tank is tapu water. It shouldn't be drunk because it's missed the attribute of going through Papatuanuku to be filtered first and foremost. Because one thing I did discover south of Auckland in the Waikato area was the water testing was done on farms for water tanks. And there was a high concentration of E. coli and fecal coliform in the tanks. So the air was saturated with E. coli and the fecal coliform from unknowingly the industry. And as the raindrop came through the sky, it grabbed it, dropped on the roof, and went into the water tank. That's where, because there was a little bit of anomaly as to where did this contamination come from? It came out of the air as the raindrop was falling. And so that led to a big, so to remove that, what we did with our wastewater treatment system, I'll explain it that way, we established sprinkler systems, and we brought the raw material of wastewater into a water system that allowed the water to sprinkle, replicating the cloud, right? And it's certain size droplets, and then it fell onto the land. And we had certain size of aggregate through some of the engineers. We managed to find the different size of aggregate that the rain dropped on in its own natural environment so that it could be filtered. And we even added a microorganism called the tiger worm. Murray, so we used the tiger worm we got that concept from a place called Hahe down in, not Hahe, Kaka Point down in the South Island, where they had the wastewater treatments there. Very hard to sell to local industry, an organic system without power source and all that kind of thing. They wanted to use a system that involved steel plates, and pressure was pulled, and the pollution was rendered down that way, but it didn't actually do it. As it went through the land, and then it had the worm absorbed all of the treatment, untreated water, and then the worm discharged vermicast, which became a valuable product. That's what we did to our wastewater treatment here, and using those tools that we had in our Taha Māori world, we replicated the natural environment, Murray. So as a water quality standard that validated us doing that when it came to this mining exercise, it concluded with what I'll call a whakatauki, or a phrase, because we know local government have a water quality. One of them is bathing, one of them is drinking, and one of them is harvesting. These are the ones that we know. So there are consistently maintained water quality standards for bathing. So the water quality allows a certain amount of fecal coliform and E. coli, or let's just call it pollution, to maintain bathing. You can't drink it. You can't drink water out of a river because of the runoff and all that kind of thing. But we were lucky enough to have an industry here called the oyster industry, which meant they're going to harvest seafood through commercial venture. So we had a unique opportunity to have a water quality of food harvesting, Murray, if you can understand that. So you analyze all the tools you have available to you, and the standard that came out of it was, my tupuna said, go to the river and drink, for it will give you life. What we're talking about here, we're talking about a type of water that has certain minerals in it that are drinking water quality standard. I own a small drinking water supply, and too often scientists and engineers and reports try to replicate the natural environment with technology. And each time a new event arrives, Murray, and it's sad to say this, from my experience in the last 15 years, a new system arrives, we seem to get further and further away, because all I'm actually told to do is increase my chlorine, and would you like fluoride in your water? That's where it actually goes at the end of the day. So getting back to you guys, and if there is any assistance, first and foremost, Murray, is to keep the concept of Māori and Pākehā working together.
Yes.
Because communication, we were very, very surprised what communication with the two cultures did. Just sitting down and having a cup of tea. And the kinds of discussions that start to open and people start to, I'll say, start to open their hearts to one another. Now, you can't do that in any other environment. And I want to apologize because what I'm going to say next isn't any help whatsoever. What happens when you don't open your hearts to one another? The government come riding in on a white horse and go, "We've got the solution."
That's
and
right.
that's
I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
yeah. And break it up, you guys, and we'll come and, you know what I mean. And it goes from bad to worse. So I'm really excited. This water quality, go to the river and drink, for it will give you life, is not a standard of water quality that local government have right now today, because you can only achieve that through that natural system that I'm going to say, Murray, can be replicated with today's technology. Like I said, we got some 100 mil pipe coming out with a pump, coming out of raw sewage, going into another pond that had a sprinkler system to replicate a raindrop that fell onto the land, that went through, and the microorganisms in there, including the tiger worm. We replicated the natural Tangata Whenua environment in modern technology.
Yes, yes.
Right, so it can be done. So the source of a water quality, and possibly, Murray, with what you're doing there, is to look at the natural environment, that on how the natural environment treats water for the purpose, and replicate it with simple technology. Right, the system that they offered us up here, Murray, was called a membrane reactor. If you go to Aroha, you'll see one. You need a nuclear power plant to run it. Okay. So what that is, yes.
Whereabouts is one? You said Aroha,
Aroha. Aroha. It's a place by it's by Raglan. Not Raglan. The other side on the east coast. Where everyone goes for holiday. Oh, I can't think of it. South of Auckland. South of Auckland. Coromandel. It's inland from Coromandel.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a big, huge, right in the middle of the paddock, there's this big, huge wastewater treatment system. And it's isolated from the community because of the industry, leather tanning systems, that, you know, what that was going to do for us if we were to consider the membrane reactor. Does this fit with your culture? And as soon as we got there and heard the noise, we went, no, this doesn't fit our culture. You know, some of that, but we went and had a look at it. Membrane reactor. Okay. Even the word reactor will indicate what sort of power source you needed. Then we went over to Coromandel and we looked at a membrane filter, which was a system that sat inside a shipping container. And that did achieve, but again, what that equated to us up here in Kaeo, Murray, that our rates would go up by a third if we had to take either one of those two systems on. And our community were hell-bent on not, you know, our economy is suffering already as it is. So that's another consideration, Murray, as we know and we found, which is significant, is whatever you decide, local government will put the burden of cost onto the ratepayer. Mm-hmm. And that too often is not considered. Okay, it's not considered.
If we were to sort of look at the bathing and the drinking and the harvesting, in regards to the streams that run through our farms and through forests in the district, are you aware of any metrics around measuring the well-being of the tuna, of the eel, or kura, or cress? Any sort of indicators that are used along those lines?
Yes, in Whangarei here, Murray, Ngāti Wai, right? And it just so happens that there's a training program that's been developed around this water quality from a cultural perspective. And it's very, very interesting. It uses what they used to call it was a white bait connection kit, right? Yeah. And what it did was you had a net, right? And you stood just a foot or so above this net, and you stirred up the water with your gumboot, with your foot. And what you caught invertebrates in that net. Now, there are a number, and I can't remember the number offhand, Murray, but there were a number of families of invertebrates, or they call them mayflies.
Oh, yes.
Right? And, you know, for an example, just for the sake, because I don't remember, you have 30 different families of mayfly. Right? And what Ngāti Wai did was they discovered if the absence of certain mayflies weren't in there in your sample, that meant that this contaminant was happening.
Yeah.
Right? And they call it a cultural indication.
Okay.
And it works. It works very, very. I can get you more information on that because they still use that system today. There's also a new system, Murray, that can also be, and comes from a cultural perspective, and it's to do with DNA of species. And you collect a sample from a stream through the EPA scientists, and you collect DNA, you send it to them, and they have found species of that live in water that they didn't know existed in certain areas because of that DNA, because the species don't arrive there when people go there to do the sampling. So there's...
Sorry, they don't arrive there. What does that mean?
Certain species don't appear in a stream every day of every year.
Oh, I see.
And this was something that was discovered recently by scientists. You know, they come and take a sample and they say, this is what's happening. And that allows a resource consent or a discharge consent to be given, when all they needed to do was wait another month and that whole stream would come alive with eels and coda breeding and all those. But those invertebrates were the best way to... Murray, when you have no invertebrates in a stream, that's because a dairy farmer just dumped a truckload of milk in the stream. That's what was discovered, and because the milk takes out all the oxygen. Okay, so I would, these two examples that I've just shared with you came from a cultural basket. And then it was disseminated and put to today's technology. We teach children to do the white bait connection kit. We teach children to take the DNA samples, Murray, that give you that. But if you work with Tangata Whenua, they will disclose what species used to be there. Right? Now, what my experience has told me, if you allow the river to create its habitat, that species will come back. You don't need to reintroduce a species, you reintroduce the habitat. And a lot of those habitats were, in fact, treatments for that water quality. What farmers are doing, planting trees and along the sides of streams and putting those, it's the best thing you can do. It's the best thing that has been done. And what I'm excited about is they do it willingly and fence it off, because they can see we had a friend in Raglan years ago. He started it doing down there. We know the story of Raglan, but unfortunately industry got a bit more overwhelming because of that water quality, which gave, it's good to have that foresight into the behaviour of government, Murray. When they see a good thing happening, all it means to them is that, yay, we can dump more contaminants in there. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, it's not their fault that they think like that. And I have to say that. but they can be a little bit difficult at times. So it's good to, another tool, Murray, is to have that life experience and look forward to make sure that the next generations still have the same pleasure that people like yourself and I have created, because only too easily can it be destroyed with a new law. And that's what this Three Waters thing is about, is destroying the good work, in my own personal opinion, Murray, that people like yourself and I have done with land.
I mean, I suppose that's a political question, but is that how you perceive the Three Waters as as it's presented to us so far, that it would be detrimental to the community work that is being done around the place, at least?
It's a social and cultural opinion, Murray, because of some of the habits. Now, the only advantage, we've looked at this very, very intimately, is it's an economy-driven perspective. And the best part of all, Murray, for you and I living in the north of the North Island, is what we've experienced is when a law is made in Wellington, it takes a good 20 to 25 years to make its way up here. And in the meantime, we can question who's going to police it. And can local government here, which are already saying, you're just overloading us up with more work that we can't do. So there's these new things that are being spoken about doing. And Murray, if I can say, we're not going to suffer from it as far as Tangata Whenua are concerned, because we're still using these tools that we've been handed down. The people that are going to suffer are good Kiwi people. And in a lot of cases, those people that are Pakeha, but the government calls them in the census New Zealand people, New Zealanders, they're the ones that are going to suffer from that perspective. If that's okay, answering it like that, Murray.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
So, yeah.
Oh, thank you for those indicators. Clearly, well, we're a bit behind the eight ball on this, and there's a well-trodden track ahead of me regarding how we can monitor things other than just phosphates, and it does seem to be quite a well understood techniques.
Yes, I will get some of that information for you, Murray, and we'll put that out, and I'll get some of the examples. The smack kit is what they call it today. It's just a bucket with a long clear tube, and you just walk out to the river and you've got a little microscope there where you can actually see the invertebrates, and that's really fun when it comes to kids. You seen that movie Alien? This is where they got those things from, is from these microorganisms and these mayflies, I'll call them, which just keep recycling, and they're the best indicator that you can get. Now, I appreciate the opportunity to do this with you, Murray, and any other experiences or getting down to the nuts and bolts of how this process will go for you guys. Anything that we can share would be gladly more than willing to assist in any way. There are some good people, Murray. So in saying that, thank you for your time, and ngā mihi tēnā koe e te rangatira, Murray. Kia ora.
Thank you, Bryce. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank
Beautiful.
you.